You should play Ultrakill. You should especially play Ultrakill if you like boomer shooters and Devil May Cry, because that's essentially what this is. An unholy mixture of two holy games. I mean, if you go to this website, it takes you straight to the Steam page for the game. It knows exactly what it's doing. While I'm not the most experienced Devil May Cry player, I am more than familiar with Quake and the spawn of boomer shooters that have been taking its side for the last couple of years. Even though I like many of these new old school shooters, some can run into the issue of feeling like retreads of overly familiar territory, but that is far from the case with Ultrakill. Ultrakill is straight up one of the freshest games I've played in a very long time. This game does take a lot of the good elements from its boomer shooter brethren, but it stands out in a myriad of ways. Take the weapons as an example. Most of the classics are here: pistol for longer ranges, shotgun for up close and personal, nail gun for crowd control, and railgun for burst damage. But each gun has alternative fire modes that allow it to have more utility than just its base form. It's somewhat similar to Unreal Tournament, except there's much more variation here. Let's take a look at the pistol to get a better idea of what I mean. The default mode for the pistol is a charged shot by holding the right mouse button. This charged shot can do pretty great single target damage, especially if you hit the weak points. But the secondary mode is where things get much more interesting. Once you flip this coin in the air, you have a litany of options of what you can do with it. You can shoot it with your pistol, and if it's hit at the right time, it'll shoot out into two stronger projectiles. You can throw another coin to try and link the coin attacks together to do more damage. If you're good enough, you can juggle the coin with your melee attack to get the coin to do even more damage when you eventually do shoot it. Or you can throw a bunch of coins and hit them with the railgun to inflict massive damage.
For massive damage.
The coin is one of the most interesting weapon mechanics I've seen in a shooter or really any game. I would make an entire video on the coin itself if this guy hadn't done a much better job than I ever could. These kinds of fast precision shooting mechanics would only work in a movement system that could keep up, and oh boy does this game ever. This straight up might be one of the fastest shooters I've ever played without it becoming complete jarbled nonsense. It might look like nonsense on the screen, but that's because I tend to play shooters like a cat on an 8-ball of that good nip. But I assure you that I was firmly in control and in understanding of what was going on the entire time. The game has basic movement mechanics that we've seen in other shooters, like a jump, a wall jump, a crouch slide, and a ground pound. But like other old school shooters, the real fun and speed comes when you pair the movement tech with the weapon tech to get to previously unreachable areas and previously unthinkable speeds. When I first started the game, all of these tools felt good to use on their own, but I wasn't really sure how to chain them together. I was more worried about trying to get my health back by getting covered in blood than by doing anything cool. And yeah, you get your health back by bathing in the blood of your enemies. It's pretty goddamn metal. Starting out, I had all the tools but none of the ability, but eventually you'll have both. You'll need both the knowledge and the execution when coming back through the levels to try and get higher ranks, which is where the real difficulty, and in my opinion, the real fun is. These ranks are where the Devil May Cry influence comes in hard. The game is constantly keeping score of what you do and how you're doing it, so hitting a shot back at an enemy will show up as a parry and cause your score to go up. Like DMC, your score can go up and up until finally hitting an Ultrakill, which is the highest combo rank in the game. There's something satisfying about watching your combo go up from a B to an Ultrakill or a shitstorm because of one returned projectile or huge play killing a bunch of enemies. Seriously, watching a crowd of enemies explode into a mountain of blood was fun every time I did it. When I played through the levels the first time, I didn't really keep track of my score. I wasn't really good at the game yet, and I didn't really try and get as hyped out on it as possible. Instead, I saved all of that kind of nonsense for coming back to it later, where then I would watch the score like a hawk. Each level also gives you ranks on your performance, which are tied to these combos, and the highest rank here is a P rank, and these are really hard to get, at least for me. They don't really require complete perfection, but they certainly do require a good mastery of the game and its mechanics. I normally don't go back and try and get stuff like this, because it usually doesn't do anything, but in Ultrakill there are hidden levels and P levels which can be unlocked by getting these ranks. I have unlocked some of the hidden levels and they are interesting to say the least. Each chapter has one completely hidden level and each of these levels play out completely differently than the normal gameplay. I won't spoil what they are because they're really fun to play through and they aren't really hard to unlock even if you're not very skilled at the game, but they are definitely worth unlocking just to see the complete genre changes that each of these levels provide. Clearly a lot of thought and effort went into these levels, which is great to see because like I said, they're usually one-off mechanics or one-off genre shifts that don't affect the rest of the game. It's certainly high praise of a shooting game when it's fun to play even when there isn't anything to shoot, and this game definitely fits the bill. Exploring these levels after killing everything to try and find these secrets is consistently entertaining and fun. Just moving around and messing about with different tech is a blast, and I'm sure that these tools will produce some bonkers speedruns when this thing finally is done. That is something worth noting. The game isn't finished yet. The dev is still working away at it, and as of this video, recently released another batch of levels. And yeah, you heard me right, developer as in a single guy. This single madman has made the game art and music, and oh boy is the music good. Like many of the other aspects of this game, the music is a breath of fresh air in a genre which can be overly referential of earlier titles. A lot of these boomer shooters tend to have metal or industrial soundtracks, and while I actually do like that type of music, it's refreshing to have something new in a genre that doesn't usually see enough representation within games. Drum and motherfucking bass. The game still has its fair share of crunchy guitars that someone would expect from booting up one of these games, but hearing these infectious drum loops was really refreshing. I remember a lot of PS1 games had soundtracks which featured drum and bass in it more prominently, but the genre seems all but forgotten by games these days. And I never thought it would work with a shooter this well, but it really does. There's also songs that seem like they really wouldn't work in a game like this, like Calm Piano, but within the context of the game they actually work out really well. Pretty much every song in the game is something that I would play outside of the game, which is impressive considering that this is all the work of just one single guy. I would have forgiven the music if it was forgettable or just bland, but instead it's just as memorable as the rest of the game. I think that the way the game looks can either be a big draw for people or make them indifferent to the title. The idea of making the game look a lot like the PlayStation 1 era is cool, but not necessarily a draw for me. I never grew up with a PS1, so I don't really have any real nostalgia for the way that the games looked. The game is definitely going for more of a PlayStation 1 type look than something more PC traditional like Quake or Unreal. There's even a plethora of settings in the menu to make the game look more like a PS1 game if you really want to. I never really messed with this stuff besides to see exactly how disgusting you could make the game look, but for some people I can see the appeal of trying to mess around with graphical settings like this. I just like my games to look more neat and clean, and rigid polygons don't bother me. Luckily, I don't have to deal with any texture or model warping unless I want to turn it on manually. I do think that the game looks good overall. The lower poly count is helpful for the developer, as I'm sure it takes down the development time, but it's also helpful from a gameplay perspective. Since the game is using a simpler look, it makes it a lot easier to keep track of what's going on. I think that if the game was going for a more complex look, it would quickly become a complete mess of colors and outlines, which would hurt the gameplay. I do think that the levels get more visually interesting as you play. The prelude is somewhat dull, and it's mostly just an old factory with metal looking areas, but by the first chapter it kind of throws that whole thing for a loop. These levels are all outside, but they aren't really outside because you're still boxed in by the skybox, which I thought was pretty funny. I also found a bunch of speakers on this level, which I like to assume is what's playing the background music for the stage, which would fit because this stage uses a lot of piano and classical music. The next set of levels are all in a cyberpunk-like cityscape with a lot of purples and pinks and blues, and I really love the look of these stages. I didn't notice until my second playthrough of the stage that you can see the boss from the very first part of the level.
Hello there.
After that level, you have a flesh world. Yeah, you heard me right, a flesh world. Finally, the most recent and my favorite in terms of gameplay and graphics is an ancient Egyptian ruins level. Unlike the first chapter, there's no box to try and keep you inside of some fake boundaries. You're really outside this time. These levels are extremely open and they're really fun to break. More importantly, you're rewarded for getting to places that you feel like you shouldn't be able to. If the levels are this good in terms of visual and gameplay design moving forward, I'll be more than happy with the way that the game turns out. But there's gotta be some bad stuff, right? Well, I don't think that there's anything straight out bad, but there are some things that players might want to know before going in. If you want a strong story, this probably isn't the place for it. There is a story and it does explain what's going on, but it's either cryptic or I'm just kinda the big dumb. All I know is that I'm a robot who might look like Pathfinder, but I'm not Pathfinder. I know they both have grapples, but they're different, I swear.
Who's ready to fly on a zipline?
And in this world, all the humans are dead. I regain health by getting covered in blood, and there's angels that are trying to kill me. I'm sure someone can break down all the lore, but it's not necessary to enjoy the game by any means. Another thing to know is that the game is goddamn hard. I never really got frustrated by the game, but at no point is this a walk in the park, especially when you're first starting out. Normal gameplay isn't terribly hard, especially if you're just trying to beat the level, but some of these bosses gave me some serious trouble. For the record, I played on standard difficulty and have yet to hit P ranks on each stage because, well, I'm pretty bad. Out of curiosity, I cranked the difficulty all the way down to the lowest level, and honestly, I think that anyone would be able to play the game at the lowest difficulty because all the enemies move a lot slower. But if you're looking for a challenge, the higher difficulties will definitely have you covered. My final and only real complaint is that it's just not finished. Wanting more out of a game is certainly not something to complain about, especially when it's in an early access state. The developer is working away at it, and unlike some other early access games that I was lured into, I have a lot of faith that this one will not only be finished, but will be absolutely fantastic when it is. I was dumb enough to back Starbound, but that thing sucked ass in early access, and it still sucks ass now. And honestly, I'm still bitter. For that reason, I usually don't recommend early access games because they can go off the rails and become some disgusting monster of what was initially promised. But for Ultrakill, I can't wait to see the new secrets, the new gun variations, maybe whole new weapons, bosses and environments, and everything else that it's going to bring to the table. I have faith that this game will turn out great, and even if everything sucks from this point on, what's on display here already is 100% worth buying. If you like boomer shooters, Doom Eternal, or are just looking for something new and fresh to sink your teeth into, give Ultrakill a try. There's a free demo on Steam, and I'm pretty sure that that thing will run on modded PS1 hardware, so you really have no excuse. It is worth noting that the demo uses the prelude levels, which are the ones that I find the least visually interesting. If you can get past that and know that the game does nothing but improve with each level, I think that you'll really enjoy it. And hey, since I was looking at Steam, it's crazy that this is the top rated game on the entire platform of all time. It's got 99% overwhelmingly positive reviews, which is completely nuts. So get in there and see for yourself what makes Ultrakill a must play.
That's right, we're Japanese.